The story of the Iceman is fascinating. No, not him. I mean Ötzi the Iceman. See, back in 1991, some hikers in the Ötztal Alps discovered what they thought was the corpse of another hiker. The local authorities got to work digging the poor guy out when they started finding all kinds of strange objects near the body. Stuff like a stone knife, grass shoes, and a sweet copper axe. The body, along with some of the artifacts, was taken to a medical examiner, who in turn called in an archaeologist, who in turn declared that this was not a recently deceased hiker, but was, in fact, an over 4,000-year-old mummy. Later on, carbon dating showed that the mummy was actually around 5,300 years old, making old Ötzi Europe's oldest known natural mummy. Good job, buddy. Work was done to try to figure out who he was, where he came from, and how he died. At first, it was thought that he simply died of exposure to the extreme cold weather. Then they thought maybe he'd been ritually sacrificed, but an arrowhead lodged in his shoulder told the tale. Ötzi had been murdered by an arrow shot in the back. Further analysis also revealed the blood of at least 4 other people on Ötzi's gear, meaning Ötzi probably wasn't just a hapless victim, Ötzi may have been a killer himself. But while investigators have pretty much figured out the how of Ötzi's death, we can only really speculate as to the why. After all, it's not like Ötzi left behind a diary or an autobiography or anything. And it's that story, the story of why Ötzi was killed, that is the subject of today's movie, Iceman. Iceman opens with a birth and a death. Ötzi, named in this movie as Kelab, is summoned from his cabin to another where a woman is in the throes of childbirth. Kelab grabs a wooden box, and as he enters the cabin, the pregnant woman falls to the ground. He opens the box to show the contents to his wife, who is attending to the mother, and as she looks from the box back to the pregnant woman, we hear a baby's cry and realize the mother has died. There is a funeral for the mother and a ceremony for the new baby. Sometime later, Kelab goes off on a hunt, and while he's gone, 3 men brutally attack and slaughter his entire tribe. They rifle through the cabins and soon find their quarry, the wooden box. Back in the woods, Kelab smells the smoke and immediately rushes off, only to see his home in flames. He hurries back, sees the 3 men leaving, but ignores them for now to search for survivors. The attackers were ruthlessly thorough, but thanks to Kelab's son, miraculously they missed the baby. Kelab gives his family burial rites, takes his gear and the baby, and sets off on a quest to find the murderers and avenge his tribe. Iceman was not the movie I was planning to review this week. In fact, I had no clue this movie even existed. I was looking for, of all things, The Last Showgirl, but it still hasn't hit streaming, and somehow from searching for a movie about a past her prime Las Vegas showgirl, I was recommended a Neolithic revenge tale. You figure it out. But whatever strange machinations brought me to Iceman, I'm glad they did, because this movie was a wonderful surprise, made even better by the fact that I assumed it was going to be a low-rent caveman action flick, but was wronger than wrong about that. Before the movie starts, a title card pops up that tells you that all the dialogue is in an old language called Redic. Rayatic, and translation isn't needed for you to grasp what's going on. Now right then I knew that this wasn't some cut-rate production, because lazy half-assers don't typically make creative decisions like that. And it's true, you don't need to know what is actually being said, because the performances and direction are so good that the story is conveyed clearly through the camera work and the physical acting. There's never any doubt as to what's going on or what a character is thinking or feeling, because everyone does a magnificent job of wordlessly emoting. That's a real testament to an actor's skill right there, to be able to convey thought, emotion, or intent with a mere facial expression or gesture. And everyone here nails it. Iceman is 100% visual storytelling at its finest. Complementing the fantastic acting is the equally fantastic direction and gorgeous cinematography. When a story has no dialogue to help with exposition, shot composition and camera work is extra important. Everything the audience needs to know has to come through in the pictures you're showing them. So every set, every movement, every lack of movement, every action, every costume, every frame you shoot has to be feeding information to the audience in a way that they will pick it up. For example, Caleb is going on a hunt. No one ever says this. We see that he is through his actions and what gear he is packing and preparing. This world is dangerous and something bad could happen to Caleb while he's away. Again, no one says this, but as he's leaving, he looks at his wife and baby as they sleep, and he gives his son a look and a hug. And through this, we know he's telling them that he loves them and possibly even goodbye. There are whole conversations in this movie that happen without a word spoken or even a sound, just looks, and you still know exactly what's being said. That right there, that's mastery of your craft. That's not to say that the sound isn't good. It is. The score is pretty minimal, which I appreciate. I wouldn't want some epic Hans Zimmer score stepping all over things. To be honest, I probably would have preferred the music-free, no country for old men approach, but the music that's there is good and serves to accentuate the scenes without getting in the way. Most of the movie's sound is just the natural sounds of the land, and it's really enough to bring you into the world. Because of this, the warm, green places feel warmer. The cold, windy places feel absolutely frigid, and one scene in an ice cave feels utterly claustrophobic. Caves are bad enough, but ice caves really freak me out, man. The cinematography is so beautiful that sometimes it looks fake. I don't know if it was shot entirely on location, but nothing ever jumped out and yelled, "Green screen!" So either it's all on location and maybe some sets, or the green screening is just done really well. Either way, the movie looks great. I joked with my son that some locations look straight out of Shadow of the Colossus, with muted browns, greens, and grays, and even light bloom. Man, I love that game. The story is pretty straightforward and uncomplicated, but well-paced and well-told. As I mentioned earlier, every part of it is told through visuals and actions, but it never drags or feels rushed, and never did I find myself wondering what was happening. Even the messages the movie is trying to convey come across successfully. I will say that there are two events that feel a little Deus Ex Machina, not because they were unbelievable or unexpected, but because they didn't feel properly telegraphed and so come off as feeling a little too coincidental, even though they really aren't. Both make perfect sense, but probably could have used a quick scene to set them up a little better. Now obviously, Iceman is a work of fiction, more specifically, historical fiction. Ötzi really existed, and historians are pretty sure they've nailed down how he died, but no one actually knows the events leading up to his death. The writer-director, Felix Randau, had to come up with a story that made sense, and the tale told here is good and feels believable, thanks to the work put in not just in front of the camera, but before a single frame was even shot. Now, I'm no historian, but everything about this movie comes off as thoroughly researched. I mean, maybe I'm wrong and a true expert on the era could tear the film apart, but the copper-aged world they built, the people, the clothing, the tools, the structures, even the motivations of the characters, why they're doing what they're doing, all look and feel extremely authentic and believable, and they really gave me an appreciation for the era. Not just for how savage and dangerous it was, but also how organized and intelligent humans really were back then. And not to sound too cheesy, but also how little we've actually changed. It's not a time period I think about much, but thanks to Iceman, I'd love to see more movies set in prehistory. And not just historical stuff either. How about some fantasy or horror? Man, I'd love to see cavemen fighting monsters. That would be awesome. Iceman is a brutal emotional journey that covers the whole spectrum of human nature and emotion. Love, faith, anger, violence, grief, compassion, resolve, and sympathy. It's a phenomenal reminder of just how powerful the visual element of film is. Nowadays, so many movies have visuals that are nothing more than bright, flashing, disorienting spectacle meant to distract the audience to keep them from realizing how weak the writing is. But here's a movie that understands that the visuals aren't just hollow window dressing. They are a part of the story too, and in this case, tell the story. By the time the credits rolled, I was actually glad The Last Showgirl wasn't out yet because I might have never discovered this fantastic movie. Iceman is a wonderful surprise and gets a wholehearted recommendation from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Adios.